On the evening of November 12th, 1996, the sky over Delhi, India was perfectly clear. You had two jumbo jets on completely routine flights. One was getting ready to land, the other was climbing right after takeoff. But in just a few short minutes, this totally ordinary evening would become the deadliest mid-air collision in the history of aviation. 349 people. That's the number of people who lost their lives. And to really get our heads around how something like this could even happen, we have to unravel a mystery that, honestly, at first glance, just seems impossible. Here's the thing that's so hard to grasp. Air traffic control had intentionally put these two planes on paths that were separated by 1,000 vertical feet. That was the standard safety margin. And yet, they still hit each other. So how on earth does that happen? Let's dive in and figure it out. Okay, so our story really starts inside the incredibly complex world of air traffic management, a system that's designed with really just one main goal: to prevent exactly what was about to unfold. You know, you gotta think of the sky as being full of invisible highways. And just like cars on a road, planes follow these set routes called airways. To keep them from running into each other, air traffic controllers assign each plane a very specific altitude, what they call a flight level. This separation, this vertical space, is pretty much the bedrock of aviation safety. So on this one particular evening, two flights were put on a course that would bring them into the very same patch of sky, but flying in opposite directions. So on one side, you have Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907. It's an Ilyushin IL-76, carrying a group of merchants and its crew, and they're on their way to land in Delhi. And on the other, you have Saudi Airlines Flight 763, this massive Boeing 747, just packed with laborers heading home to their families. Two totally different planes from different places, going to different destinations. But now they're sharing the exact same airspace. And this is the critical part. Both of them were flying on an airway called the Delhi Star. It's a standard route for planes coming and going from the city. But they were on a direct reciprocal course, headed right for each other. One coming down, one going up. The safety of all 349 people on board was now resting on them sticking to their assigned altitudes, all under the watch of one single air traffic controller, VK Dutta. All right, let's look at the timeline because this is where things get really tense. What we're about to see is a minute-by-minute breakdown of the 8 minutes that sealed the fate of everyone on board. This is where it all starts to go horribly, horribly wrong. Okay. Look here, 6:32 p.m., the Saudi flight takes off. Just 2 minutes later, the Kazakh flight is told to descend to 15,000 feet. Then, the Saudi flight gets cleared to climb to 14,000. You can see the plan right here, right? The controller is creating this perfect 1,000-foot vertical cushion between them. By 6:39, the Kazakh flight reports, "We are at 15,000 feet." Just 60 seconds later, they collide. Right before it all went down, the controller, VK Dutta, gives this absolutely crucial warning to the Kazakh crew. 12 o'clock reciprocal, that's ATC speak for directly in front of you, coming your way. He's telling them there's a 747, 10 miles ahead, and it's going to pass underneath them. But here's where a human element threw a wrench in the works. The Kazakh flight crew, they didn't speak English. They had a dedicated radio operator whose whole job was to translate everything from air traffic control into Russian. That process takes time, and in this critical moment, the operator needed the controller to clarify that warning. So Disatec clarifies. He simplifies the message. The other plane is now just 8 miles away, and it's at 14,000 feet, 1,000 feet below you. The Kazakh operator acknowledged it, and that was the last transmission anyone ever heard from Flight 1907. Just seconds later, a U.S. Air Force pilot who was flying nearby got on the radio to report seeing a massive, fiery explosion in the night sky. So what went wrong? I mean, if everyone was following instructions, this should have been impossible. The investigation that came next had to answer that one burning question. In this whole carefully managed system, where did the first domino fall? And here it is, the devastating answer. The flight data recorders, the black boxes, they told the whole story. The Saudi flight was exactly where it was supposed to be, holding steady at 14,000 feet. But the Kazakh flight, even though they had just reported being at their assigned altitude of 15,000 feet, had kept descending. At the moment of impact, they were also at 14,000 feet. That 1,000-foot safety buffer, it was gone. And, of course, that leads to the next, even more critical question. Why? I mean, why didn't this experienced flight crew stop their descent at 15,000 feet like they were told? Was it a simple misunderstanding? A problem with the plane? What happened? Well, the investigation found that it wasn't just one single mistake. It was a catastrophic chain of failures, like dominoes falling one after another. At the end of the day, yes, the Kazakh pilot made a critical error by not leveling off at his assigned altitude. But the language barrier created those crucial seconds of delay and confusion. And on top of everything, the radar system in Delhi at the time was old. It could show a plane's position, but not its altitude. The controller, VK Dutta, was completely blind to the fact that the Kazakh plane was descending into disaster. The loss of 349 lives is just an unimaginable tragedy. But from those ashes, believe it or not, came a complete revolution in aviation safety, with lessons that are still protecting every single one of us who flies today. In direct response to this crash, 3 huge changes were rolled out across the globe. First, a system called TCAS, which basically lets planes talk to each other and scream warnings at pilots if they get too close, became mandatory on all commercial aircraft. Second, English became the required international language of aviation, getting rid of that dangerous translation delay. And third, airports everywhere had to upgrade to modern radar that shows controllers a plane's altitude, giving them the exact information that VK Dutta never had. So the next time you're on a plane, just think about that for a second. A huge part of the invisible shield of technology and procedures that's keeping you safe up there was forged in the fire of this very disaster. It's a really somber legacy, but it's an incredibly powerful one. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? We move through this complex world surrounded by these invisible systems. In the planes we fly, the hospitals we visit, the bridges we cross, and so many of them were built on the tough lessons learned from past failures. It really makes you wonder, how many of these silent guardians born from tragedy are out there working to protect us every single day?